This is a tier list ranking Eagle Stratagems against the Terminids for the patch 01000.400. S tier means that the stratagem is absolutely amazing and will be relevant in almost every mission you go on against the bugs. A tier is very similar to S tier, but the stratagem is maybe overshadowed in some way by other stratagems. B tier is for stratagems that are very good at one or two things. They're amazing in those situations, but struggle to do much else. C tier is for mediocre stratagems that are maybe useful in some very niche situations, but basically don't do anything. And traitor tier is reserved only for stratagems that help the enemies more than your teammates. Now let's get started. First up, the 500 kg bomb. Arguably one of the best ways to kill a titan. You get two uses, so assuming you don't miss, you can kill 2 titans every 2 minutes. This sounds amazing, and it is, but I think it's only bottom of S tier rather than the top. One reason for this, of course, is that the hitbox is primarily vertical, and it doesn't extend very far horizontally, so it's very easy to miss the one shot on the titan. But the main reason is that most non-Eagle stratagems have just gotten so much better. In the early days, you were kind of forced into bringing multiple Eagles, since most other stratagems were kinda terrible. But now orbitals and turrets are actually really good now. And since Eagles don't stack very well, since they share the same cooldown, you are now given a real incentive to not bring multiple Eagles. 500 kg right now can easily be replaced by Precision Strike, assuming that there's no orbital scatter. And since bringing it will make your other S tier Eagles worse, the opportunity cost of bringing the 500 kg recently has just been getting higher and higher, but it is still a very powerful stratagem, but just comparatively not as powerful as it used to be, which is why it's only at the bottom of S tier. Next is the Eagle Airstrike, one of the very first stratagems you start off with, and it is amazing. It is basically a jack of all trades, master of all. It has incredible horde clear with how fast it comes down and its massive AoE, and it has anti-tank capabilities, so it can easily kill chargers, destroy titan sacks, and even destroy structures like bug holes, shrieker nests, or even spore spewers. It does everything you could possibly want or need in a stratagem, easily the very top of S tier. And then we have the Eagle Clusters. This is yet another amazing stratagem. The amount of chaff enemies that spawn now is kind of insane, so using clusters is even more valuable than before. This one stratagem by itself can fulfill basically all of the chaff clearing your loadout could ever possibly need. And it can even close bug holes too, although it's a bit inconsistent. And any medium enemies that survive will be pretty tenderized by its explosives. This is another S tier Eagle stratagem. And moving on to the strafing run now. This thing got a massive buff this update, giving it heavy armor penetration. If it wasn't for this buff, I would have honestly just put this into traitor tier. But the heavy armor penetration now gave it a lot of utility. It is surprisingly good at clearing shrieker nests and spore spewer nows. And if you pair this with an anti-tank launcher like the Recoilless or the Quasar, rather than needing 2 shots to kill a titan, you can actually fire 1 shot off to the head and finish it off with a strafing run. This is incredibly useful and powerful when you can get it off. However, this is a bit tricky to do because the strafing run hits such a very narrow area. In addition, the increased call-in time modifier makes this especially difficult. And outside of its ability to finish off titans, and when it comes to killing chaff, it is completely overshadowed by basically every other chaff clearing stratagem. I think making it hit a slightly wider area would make it much easier to land headshots on the titans with it. Or maybe they could give it armor pen 6, allowing it to deal even more damage to titans and chargers, to lean more into its anti-heavy utility. But ultimately, it still needs a bit more love, so I think this only deserves to be in the middle of B tier due to its limited use cases. And next is the 110 rocket pods. They finally fixed the targeting, and despite this change, I wish I could love these. And the reason why I can't love it is because where the rocket pods tend to target. They tend to target the Titan or the Charger's back, and they can fairly consistently crack their backs too. However, this isn't terribly useful unless you're bringing weapons that has an explosive radius like the Plasma Punisher or the Grenade Launcher. And the rocket pods ask the player to build into them a lot more. And if you do, they are very effective at what they do. But if you don't heavily build into them, they're extremely mediocre, because hitting the back is not what you really want to be doing if you're using other stratagems or weapons. Not only that, but the hitboxes on the cracked backs of chargers is really awkward, even for explosive weapons. So for chargers, it's still not that useful, meaning that you can only really use it against Titans, which is a very restrictive use case. Therefore, I can't really justify giving these a super high rating, since they force you to pay a much higher cost to make them good. I'm going to be putting them around the same tier as the Strafing Run. Although this stratagem potentially has better anti-Titan capabilities, it doesn't have the same utility as the Strafing Run. Eagle Smoke. Low C tier. The only reason this isn't Trader tier is because it's at least good at being a smoke stratagem, unlike the Orbital Smoke. The usefulness of smokes is questionable at best, regardless, but the Eagle Smokes have multiple uses, so you can call it down in multiple locations to help you continuously break line of sight, and even though the individual smoke instances don't last very long, the fact that you have multiple uses means that if you're doing an objective like the drilling missions, you can just keep tossing them down back to back to keep the area completely covered for a long period of time. So, low C. And finally, Napalm Strike. This stratagem is mostly competing against clusters for being your anti-chaff stratagems. Compared to clusters, it does substantially more damage to the enemies that it catches in its blast radius, making it better at dealing with medium enemies. It also leaves the affected area in flames, so it's very good at controlling bug breaches. All of this comes at the cost of hitting a substantially smaller AoE compared to the clusters, as well as having fewer uses per Eagle rearm. And I think all of this is a fair trade-off. However, I do believe that the flexibility that clusters offer is generally a bit better on the majority of missions. While the Napalm Strike is an S-tier stratagem, I would place it just a bit lower than the clusters. Alright, thank you for watching, and if you have any differing opinions, let me know in the comments.